Hi, I'm going to share with you my very first field work that I did as an archaeological intern for the Oregon State Historic Preservation Office this year. A little bit of background. A private property owner contacted the Oregon SHPO archaeology staff in January of this year after he discovered an obsidian BiFace on his property while he was moving earth in preparation for building a water feature. So normally the SHPO staff would notify this property owner of the applicable state statutes requiring a permit and recommend that he or she hire a professional archaeologist to determine whether or not there's an archaeological site. In this case, the SHPO staff determined this could be a great opportunity to help out the private property owner and also educate the public and some school children about archaeology and also tribal consultation. So we went out in June 2016, and the first thing that we did was we surveyed the site and laid it out in grids. So this was a particularly challenging site because there was a lot of ground cover and trees, and it was on a pretty steep slope. So we had to pick out the most likely place that we might find additional artifacts. So we chose adjacent to where the property owner had found that the first one. So luckily we had several archaeologists who volunteered their time. In this picture you can see, I think, 4 of them. We had a total of 6, and then I was there as an archaeological intern. So I learned a lot about how to lay out a site and how to actually start a test unit on a steep slope. So it was pretty interesting for me. A little bit of more background on the permit. So in Oregon, a permit is required to do exploratory archaeology. That's what we were doing. So the SHPO issued a permit, which is good for 1 year, and the area was issued a trinomial number 35MA 375, and the proposed scope of work included permission to dig a minimum of at least 1 test unit and up to 10 1 by 1 meter test units. And these units had to be dug according to the required SHPO methodology, which meant they had to be excavated in 10 centimeter levels to a minimum depth of 50 centimeters below the surface with 2 sterile levels, meaning you had to dig deep enough so that you had 2 levels where you weren't finding anything. And all of the sediment had to be screened through 1/8 of an inch mesh, and all cultural material found had to be collected by unit and level in marked in bags. That was actually my primary job, that and the screening. So you can see here we've started digging the test units into the side of the sloped hill here. And moving on, the most exciting thing about this was the educational opportunity. So the property owner is actually a teacher at a local school, and so he brought a couple of school groups out, and they had an opportunity to learn firsthand about archaeology. So you can see pictured here a mom and her son doing some screening, and even cooler, OPB, Oregon Public Broadcasting, heard about what we were doing, and they came out and filmed the kids doing some of this work. So they had an opportunity to ask questions and really got into the screening. So that part was a lot of fun. So here you can see these are the things that one of the first few things that I found, and I was pretty excited. So the biggest thing you can see is that it's a piece of fire-cracked rock, and in another quadrant of the bowl there you can see some charcoal, and underneath that, it's hard to see, there's some seeds. The most exciting thing I found is this shard of red obsidian, which according to the archaeologists there, we don't have that here in Oregon. They were able to source it from a place in California, so most likely someone was carrying it up here to trade here in the Salem area. So that was pretty cool. So probably though the most exciting thing that we found in our work here was the obsidian bifaces that were all really intact. So you can see on the left there's an archaeologist who's brushing away one that's actually in one of the units still. And you can see I have one on my knee. They're pretty big. And we found a total of 14. You can see them bagged there and on the table. And so this cache of bifaces, it's a bit of a mystery as to why they were here. This hill is relatively close to a creek, and most likely it was a trail system that led to Salem, where he was probably going to trade them. They're pretty big, so they were probably source material that they would have traded to create other things, like maybe arrowheads. We're not sure. So I was in charge of doing a lot of the paperwork as well and confirming that the test units were all even and level, which again was such a challenge on that slope. So you can see me here measuring my test unit, and the other archaeologist, he was writing something on a report that I had already filled out. So I learned a lot. I learned a lot out here on my first site visit doing this field work. And the hardest part, to be honest, was when we cleaned it up, we just had to fill everything in and we had to leave it as we found it. So I had a hard time letting go of my beautiful test units. So the next steps are to do some testing in the labs to see exactly how old these obsidian bifaces are, and then to consult with the tribes of the Grand Ronde. This is their area, and to determine what will actually happen to the cache of bifaces once our investigations have been completed. There's also a question about whether we might come back out and do some more digging and to see if there might be something else out there. Well, I'm glad I had the opportunity to share my experience with you, and I hope you found it educational. Thanks.